Bruce is gonna be out for the meeting, right? So.
He's on Zoom.
Yeah, but didn't he say he wasn't gonna be?
He's not here for the meeting.
Oh, perfect. Over under just went to 6:59.
Okay.
So who else
You're
not
on
at the
the-
meeting?
Bruce,
Just kidding.
looks like he's driving.
There is no over under.
There it is.
And then you said out, and
Roman are gone.
a plus one.
All right, we got 3 for the work session. Plus Bruce, who's making every effort while in transit, it looks like.
Got sunroof open?
Hopefully he's not driving.
He's driving while eating dinner.
Don't cancel and drive, Bruce.
I am not driving. I am parked.
I think he's passing going 65 on 135 right now, actually. Looks like it, that's all.
That is funny.
Too soon, all right. Hey. All right, we're gonna get this work session started up here with the Mount TV Town Council. Do we roll call this, Tiffany?
No.
Didn't think so, okay, cool.
Can I get the call, Bruce? Yes. Okay, you're good.
All right, we're here today, continuation of our last meeting's work session, where some councilors had expressed to continue this, make sure we cover all the bases and get all these things right. So we are continuing that today. And I will hand it off to Shannon if she's got anything else to add, and as well Nick Klein on Zoom.
Yeah, I think you opened it up pretty well. This is a continuation of the deed restriction work session. We took a lot of feedback from the last work session and updated the deed restriction draft template. And the list of changes were also included in our staff report. So the goal of this work session is to continue to finesse. I did receive some comments and questions from a few counselors between the last work session and now, so thank you all for those, and we have updated and hopefully answered a lot of questions. And we can get to the 2 big points of discussion are around retirement,
Yeah.
disability and residency requirements, which we added the residency requirement back in. But I'll let Nick say anything if he needs to, and then we can also maybe start with any outstanding questions and then get into our decision questions. Does that make sense to you, Nick?
Yeah, that works, Shannon. I wanted to briefly touch on the residency requirement that was added in. At the last work session, council will recall that Carlos brought up that the residency requirements were disfavored in the past based on prior advice to not implicate the Fair Housing Act. I did some research and I could not find any case law that directly applied to a residency requirement and a deed restriction as implicating the Fair Housing Act. With that being said, I believe the theory of law here is that it could be discrimination against someone's national origin if there is a residency requirement. So without that solid case law, though, that's more speculative. And you'll see that I added on in section 9(2) a sentence saying, notwithstanding any provision of this restriction pursuant to the Fair Housing Act, we won't discriminate against anyone. I think that probably has us covered if we want to keep with the residency requirement, because essentially, if we were to feel that perhaps a denial would potentially implicate the Fair Housing Act, the restriction would have the flexibility to essentially allow us to waive the residency requirement. That's not to say that we're totally without risk, and there is a slight degree of risk in adopting this residency requirement, but I don't perceive it as a massive risk, and for that reason, I included it tonight so that you can at least see what that would look like. Everything else, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. You also received a confidential communication from me last week going over some of the, I guess we could say, the guardrails against what the code restricts the council's consideration of. But other than that, I found that there were pretty minor red lines that needed to be implemented. And obviously, we can do more red lines tonight if so desired. I will also communicate to the council that I was able to speak with counsel for Oros, and I do believe it's staff's intention and the Oros team's hope that the council will find this form acceptable tonight and ultimately set it for final approval / consideration for the May 5th agenda. That is the end of what I have to say for now, and I will let you all have any questions or comments that you may have.
Thanks, Nick. Wanted to open it up. Does anyone want to start off on anything specific? Bruce, I see you up there too. You can just chime in for a work session if you want.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yep, totally.
Perfect. Yeah, regarding Oros and the code, I understand what Nick said about, we can't, do a deed restriction that doesn't follow the current code, and that Oros has the right to have um, proposal reviewed based off of the current code. I wonder if they would be open to waiting for us to revise the code, considering that a lot of what we've been talking about are things that would actually make it easier for them to sell their units, once they're built and ready.
Great point, Bruce. What was something that
Nate has a prepared
Yeah,
answer for that. So I'm glad.
I gave some thought to that. Um, I will say this, and I will repeat what I've already told you guys. Um, they are entitled to a review of the code as approved by the council previously. The reason they want this review to happen now, and I believe are entitled to that review, is their community housing plan dictates that prior to receiving a building permit on the development, the community or the deed restriction, excuse me, should be, or has to be, I should say, has to be recorded. That is a requirement that is built into their community housing plan as approved by the council and as proposed by Oros. I do not anticipate that they would be willing to wait for us to amend the code accordingly. While I do understand the arguments for that, I get the sense that they want to get building as soon as possible. With all of that being said, I do think there is a potential workaround that addresses Bruce's point and could be attractive to the council. And that is this. The developer has the right to propose an amendment to their plan at any time, and the council then has to approve any amendment to the previously approved plan. If Oros were to, I guess, get told that the council is looking to update its requirements to make units easier to slot folks in, let's just say, then Oros could theoretically supply an amendment to their plan at their own behest. We could not require that amendment, but they could propose an amendment which changes the timeline around to the restriction needing to be recorded in order to be issued a certificate of occupancy for the units rather than a building permit. In that scenario, I think both parties get their goals achieved. Oros gets to start building and gets their building permit, and the town is able to get a bit more time to amend Chapter 22 and change its deed restriction requirements, while also knowing that no one can actually be in these units unless and until the deed restriction is recorded anyways. So there still is that pressure that the deed restriction plays in the process. It's just applied a little bit later on down the line. And those are my 2 cents at the moment.
Thanks, Nick. That was actually one of the things I was going to ask is if that was a possibility.
I think it's a possibility, but as I said, we cannot require that of them. But if they were willing to propose that amendment, I see nothing in the code that says we could not approve that amendment and shift the timeline. The only code section that is really implicated is 22-28, which kind of relates to phasing of the two different projects. And I think an amendment could be focused around making sure that the schedule is compliant with 22-28 pretty easily.
And we could have them, or, in coordination with them, they wouldn't even have to submit an amendment until we have a deed restriction that they like better. So it really shouldn't even slow anything down, right? It should just be,
Well,
they submit it and we approve it and we're good.
well, they would have to amend their plan at the next meeting or, whenever that would be, because the plan now says that the deed restriction uh, has to be recorded prior to the issuance of a building permit. And that is in their plan as approved by the council. So they would have to amend their plan accordingly, but it would be a kind of a dance between the council and Oros because they would have to bring it to the council and the council still does have to approve any amendment to the plan whatsoever.
Right. Would we be able to do something similar where we just record, the best deed restriction we can make right now under the current code? And then amend the deed restriction before, they go on sale at some point? Just in coordination with Oros?
Yes, I think you could, so long as the code is updated and Oros voluntarily elects to make that amendment. There is some degree of risk there, right, Bruce? Because if you record the deed restriction now and Oros says, yeah, we'd be willing to change things 6 months down the line, but then 6 months down the line, we've changed the code and they've changed their mind, we would have no way to really amend it at that point. We wouldn't be able to impose those new standards, but so long as both parties agreed and there was code support for it, then yes, that would be doable. But without that, there is that slight degree of risk in one of the two parties not playing ball.
Right. Yeah, I could see, with the other strategy where Oros just doesn't want to do an amendment when they don't know what we're going to propose yet. So they might be more comfortable with that option. But it sounds like we're not totally hamstrung here. We've got something that we can do to make it what we want rather than what we're bound to by code at the
Yeah,
current.
I would say there are options clearly. The only one in which there is less options is if we go to Oros and they say, no, we want the form approved now under the standards that we had previously approved during the consideration of our community housing plan. At that point, I would not recommend to the council that they delay approval based off of a forthcoming change to the code that ultimately may or may not happen, depending on how that discussion goes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't want to step on their rights, but at the same time, I think that we're in alignment here where, what we're doing is only going to help them. So I'd be surprised if in the future they weren't willing to just change that deed restriction over to something that's gonna just make it easier for them to sell their units. So
Yeah.
I think the cleanest, less risk way to do it. Because it sounds like all we're really trying to do by time for us to get through the process without delaying them. I think the cleanest way without risk would be Nick's suggestion of amending the housing plan.
Right now.
I think it would be at the next meeting they would propose that amendment. And I will say that I think they would probably be agreeable to that. If we asked them if they would be comfortable, I guess agreeable is not a good word, but if we asked if they would be comfortable with proposing that amendment to the council, I get the sense that they would be.
Yeah, and Shannon's been in regular contact with them, and that is her
Yeah.
belief. I don't know if anybody on the Zoom is representative of Oros can speak to that. I'm not sure, but that is our educated guess
Yeah,
for the reasons Bruce laid out.
they are, ready to pull a building permit, and so what they've expressed to me is that they're willing to compromise wherever needed in order to, capitalize on our short building season.
And I perceive from the council that the issues that are important here are those issues which we are bound by the code, and that the other peripheral issues and the makeup of the deed restriction that is more up to the council's discretion on an ad hoc basis, let's say, are less controversial. And it is really those questions of what an occupant looks like in terms of occupying a unit that is kind of causing a bit of heartburn.
But we should focus tonight on deed restriction.
The specifics, yeah.
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 Can I just repeat back what I think I heard?
Yeah.
Because- And that is that Oros is open to an amendment to their deed restriction, saying that they are willing to update it to like an updated housing code afterwards, or
Well,
what is?
I'll try and think summarize is.
Yeah.
So this is consistent with Nick's email to the council that I think went out Monday. And our issue with some of the things we're talking about is that the code says this, so the deed restriction has to align with the existing town code. But to get some of the things we've discussed, we would just have to amend the town code. So, what Nick suggested was Oros, and it's their option to bring back their housing plan, amend it. Because the current housing plan says the deed restriction shall be approved prior
Right.
to pulling a building permit. So we would change that to, till before CO or to some other different timeline. That would then allow us to make the amendments to chapter 22, which we could then amend the deed restriction or edit the deed restriction to word it the way we want it, which we believe would also be beneficial to the applicant. And based on our conversations with the applicant, we believe they would be amenable to that scenario, but we have not broached that subject with them or anything yet. But based on our conversations, their primary concern for the time being is being able to pull their building permit so they can begin construction this spring or fall.
And the community housing plan that he's referencing was the one that you guys adopted in 2025 in February. So it was quite a while ago, it was over a year ago. And that community housing plan just details, this is what the market units are, this is what is required by our inclusionary zoning town code to offset that. We're gonna do, it has all the details of like it's 6 units, and then payment for a fractional unit, and then there's the amendment that has the fractionally, or the additional payment in lieu for the extra bedroom. All that is the community housing plan, and the deed restriction is an exhibit to the community housing plan, but we can update the community housing plan, and then update the deed restriction at a later date if we feel comfortable with it, is an option. But again, tonight,
Yeah.
if we get to a point where we're really comfortable with the deed restriction, then we could do both next week or in 2 weeks, but if not, if we feel like we need a lot more time working on the deed restriction, then that's kind of our alternate pathway.
Thank you.
Are we moving right along now?
I think so.
Okay, this is a real simple one on page 11, which is 4XI. It's about HOA dues or assessments, and I talked to Shannon and Carlos about this. And instead of saying that it shall be subject to review and corrective action enforced by the town, which means we're required to do something. to change that shall to may, so it may be subject to review and corrective action.
Or shall be subject to review and may be
And may,
subject.
and may be subject.
Either work.
And so
Either
this is
way,
section
but change
4.
that, and I think it protects. It's I think it's for excise on page 11.
Yeah, I'm seeing it, Bobby. I can do that.
So that's, and I just think that is just and the only thing that I have are a couple things to clarify until, of course, Carlos sent us a little note today about what's going on in Telluride. And I think we want to be as clear as we can, so there was a story about someone in a rental affordable housing whose son turned 18, got a job, paying for his own college by himself, and all of a sudden it boosted their income out, so they no longer qualified for housing. I don't know if we can be a little more clear on page 9, and this is for 3, for Roman numeral 3, use and occupancy says limited exclusively to qualified individuals, his or her spouse and children and other immediate family members. So I don't know how you protect something like that, because that's, I mean, we need to, or adult, I don't know how you deal with that when because everything is based on household income. And they booted this lady out of her apartment, so this family out. So I don't want to ever see anything like that happening. But it could happen by looking at the way our use and occupancy is written.
Nick, to what Bobby's talking about in use and occupancy, could somebody get that place, a qualified buyer purchases the place, then they have their cousin move in with them, and then the qualified buyer moves out and is now renting to his cousin, and then another roommate that would come in. We currently don't have a system in place to process those third-party people. So right now, anybody who comes into that house would need to be qualified, correct?
That is correct, yes. And that scenario would be permissible. You can share, the space with a roommate that's not related to you. If that roommate is a qualified individual and it's not a short-term rental, you'll see that at 4.5. And you can also, as the owner, fail to occupy the unit for a period of time and then lease the unit to a qualified individual. That fact pattern is a bit less likely to occur because, in my mind, where would the owner go to lease the unit and still maintain their qualifications otherwise? Because they wouldn't be working it, if they move somewhere else or bought a house somewhere, you're not going to be qualified anymore. So that scenario, I think, is very limited in scope, but the deed restriction does allow you to have a roommate. If that roommate's qualified, then great, they can share the occupancy of the unit with you.
But by this, sorry, really quick, but by this, immediate family members, the way I'm reading this, I'm not an attorney, so you can clarify. The way I'm reading it, the immediate family members would not need to go through a qualification process.
That was my question, yeah.
Yes, okay, yes. What do you mean by immediate family members, I suppose? Because to me, immediate family members means essentially mom or dad.
Well, this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it depends who you ask too. My Italian friend will tell you his cousin is immediate family, but I won't.
I think the scenario maybe Steve is talking about is I purchase a unit as a qualified buyer. I get married. Now my spouse is part of my household. She does not have to be a qualified buyer. Or does she? That's the question.
Her part that she would play in the equation is how she influences the household income prong of qualifying someone. So if she doesn't work, right, a stay-at-home mom, and you work in the valley and you make 100K a year, your household's qualified.
What if the spouse is working outside the valley via their computer and making $300,000 a year?
She doesn't have to qualify.
Then they would not qualify, because if you look at the qualified individual piece, the section 4, or not 4, 2(9)(a), household's primary source of income shall be derived from wages and salaries earned from employment within the valley. And the AMI is always adjusted for household size as well.
So while the spouse doesn't have to qualify, their income factors into qualification?
Yes, because it's the household that's being examined.
Even if the spouse is not on the deed?
Yeah, it's still the household units that's being qualified.
So would 80% of the overall income need to come from the valley, or would 80% of the qualified buyers' income come from the valley?
The household, and that is straight from the code. An eligible household is a household that is comprised entirely of one or more residents who then meet the following qualifications.
That seems to go against the first thing you said.
And the spouse can't move there unless 80% of her income is coming from.
Exactly. Well, or the,
It's confusing.
Just tell all your neighbors it's your sister and everybody calm down. It's immediate family.
But it doesn't match up. In one sentence it says they don't have to qualify, but they really do.
right.
It's not clear.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
needs to be that's very clear.
They do have to
Well,
qualify as a household, right? So it's whatever the household being proposed is.
Let's not argue on what it says. Let's try and
Change it.
debate what we want it to say.
Then kind of going back to what Bobby said. When those kids, 16, 17, turn 18, 19, 20, are still living at home. Do you have to qualify their income, which goes back to that article you sent?
But what, I mean,
I just think that
what do we want?
I do not want people to have to leave their homes because they're becoming more successful. I want to figure out how people can stay in homes in a way that makes sense, that is keeping community members in the community. We did have a recent case with an appeal process where somebody's brokerage account did really well and they cashed out a little bit on that. The person is exactly who we want in the community. They represent every single thing I think about when I think about who I want housed in affordable community housing. So that tips the scale for me, where like, is this just gonna be a shell game where like, all right, I know you guys are looking for this, so I'm gonna put this over here. Put this in my parents' escrow account, this one will go over here, and then I'll merge this over here after I buy it. Once I close that, this will go here. And like, that's the shell game we're playing. It's ridiculous.
so we have to be real
Yeah.
clear
How about,
in our code of what we want.
can we explicitly, do we have the purview to say one person must meet the qualifications of making 80% of their income in the county? Sorry, I didn't see you had your hand up, apologies. And meet all these requirements. And, you know, make it, and that's it. And just leave it there. And I know that might get some pushback, but we've also kind of got to draw the line somewhere. And I force, yeah.
You could do that with a code amendment, but not as the code is written at the moment, because the code consistently uses the term household throughout the chapter 22 definitions at 22-2. And that's just what it is in the code. You know, an eligible household is a household that has these different income parameters. AMI is always adjusted for household size. So that change could definitely be made, but not as the way not in the way that you would like with what the code says right now.
Bruce, I got you on deck. Neil had something to point out.
I just wanted to mention, Telluride has been struggling with these same type of issues.
Yeah.
And they, because they found out that it's actually forcing people out of community housing, they exempted any teenage income within the household.
Yeah, did you see the Colorado Sun article on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good news.
I
Yeah, so
sent that out earlier today. Did I CC you on it?
I read it.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
So I think, so require an amendment to the code, but it sounds like to make that work, it would just be at least a minimum of one member of the household would have to meet the requirements of a qualified buyer. Now, the potential pitfall of that be you could have someone that's a qualified buyer. My spouse works remotely as an executive at a larger company and makes a lot of money.
Yeah,
And then that tips the balance. That's just something to be aware of.
or maybe like have a, I don't know, have a household income cap. But just have just have the requirement of 80% of the income of the qualified buyer coming from the community. Cause I think, to set the expectation that both people work for the community, I just don't know how realistic that is. But if the income cap is still there.
You could have net
maybe-
worth and the whole household net
Right.
worth counts. That's the way to get around it. But I did
Sure.
leapfrog Bruce. Bruce,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. So I give you the
Yeah.
opportunity.
Referencing the case that's Stephen just brought up, that one kind of hit home for me too and sort of changed my perspective on some things. I'm not sure that I think the 80% requirement is the best option for us. Since we've already added in the 30-hour requirement for working on average, I think that might cover us. If we have one person in the household working 30 hours a week in the valley, whilst also meeting the, requirements for AMI and net worth, I think I'm okay with that. I don't necessarily see a problem there. I don't know how others feel about it. I think Roman was kind of leaning that way last meeting, and I disagreed with him, and I since changed my mind after that appeal.
I think I could be on board with that, because I'm with you where it is discouraging to see these actual cases come to us and have to say no when they're exactly who we want a house. Just because of, a shift in the scale for a year where where that money maybe is it falls under income, but that's not the, I don't know, it's a pretty tight margin.
Bruce, how would you address contract-based work in that? Like, so I own a consulting business here in the Valley, hypothetically, and I am working with groups, and all of my stuff is really based off income. I do a contract, but I'm not including billable hours. It's strictly based on accomplishment of certain goals. How would we audit that to ensure that those folks are actually working the minimum hour requirement that we would set?
It would be difficult, but honestly, we already have it in the current model deed restriction. So I'm not proposing anything new. I don't know what the plan previously was for enforcing that. But if a person is doing contract work for a business that we've already certified as being, a local company, I would assume if there's at least a decent amount of money coming in from that company, that we could kind of just eyeball it and say, yeah, that's good. But that being said, now that I'm saying it out loud, I don't know that that's good enough for a, contract. So I would actually look to Kirsten and y'all to tell us how we could enforce that 30-hour thing in the first place. I know Aspen does their affordable housing based off of hours worked in, their community. So we might be able to look at how they're doing it.
I disagree. I like the 80% rule because market's been really good and people can make 50, if you save money for 20 years, people could be making $50,000 a year, which doesn't put them in there 80% for their day job. And so you're now giving them affordable housing. That's not right. I don't agree with that. And I think it's ridiculous to try to monitor the 30-hour stuff. The easy thing to monitor is looking at it in tax form, and that's how you know if people are meeting the requirements. And it's everything we put in here, it has to be enforced. And you don't want to make it so time consuming. Like when you look at some of the roommate stuff, you don't want to be intruding on people about their roommates. You make a rule about it and boom, this is what it is. If you have a roommate, we want to see their 80% is coming in, or however we have it written in here. And you want it to be clear to people. Like I read some of this and I don't really understand what it means because it's sort of a little iffy. It's not real strict. And Nick, you're here to help us just make sure that we have rules that can be followed and that we can monitor and take care of and that it's reasonable. And then Steve and I had a little conversation while we were waiting for the meeting to start, and I have an issue on retirement too. I don't have a solution for it, but he said, you're looking at affordable housing as workforce housing. And Steve said, I look through different lens. I look at it as community housing. So then, depending on how you look at it, you look at things differently, especially like when it comes to retirement, you have a house, you can live there till you die. Or on the other hand, if you're wanting to put it in workforce housing and say you're taking a house out of the community, then it's a whole different scenario. So I don't know what you want.
Going back to the 80-20, knowing that that's a really hard it's a really tricky line to balance, especially if you are doing secondary income investments or other things. So is it safe to assume you would be comfortable? Somebody just makes a little over and goes out and we just say, yeah, you got to move out, you have to sell your place, right?
Well, I think it's
That's where
more
I
like
that's where I
it's
start
more
to struggle.
getting in, not being kicked out. Because once you can make more money, but it's the original buying.
Well, it says in our code that they need to maintain
We have to
status.
maintain. Yeah.
So
So if we audit them in 3 years and they're now 60-40 because they took on admin work for the dad's company in Chicago because mom passed away. So we kick them out of their house. I keep coming back to this idea of like, what is it that we're trying to accomplish, which for me, it's keeping valuable community members in place, one that feed the local economy. But there's also some that like the work that they're doing in the community, the things they do for money may only have a quarter of the impact of what their personality brings and like what their life philosophy brings to the community and how they volunteer and how they participate in things in the community and such. And so I struggle with just the worker lens because it feels like we're trying to solve a very specific problem for private interest versus trying to community build, which to me has different metrics for measuring.
and I think that also aligns with, this came up at our housing retreat from our consultant, that are you looking to get people in housing that are workforce, or keep people in housing their community. So that is like basically the two, you know, parallel paths, because you can't do both. That's, or maybe there's a way to find some massaged middle. But I'm with you, Steve, like, I think community housing, if, and maybe the question too is like, are we doing an okay job with workforce housing? Like, are people that are critical to the workforce for the most part being housed? Maybe that's a bigger question that the answer is like, no, maybe, you know, because maybe it's a tiered system where you need the workforce before we can maintain a community, because we can't keep that community rolling if.
That's tough.
It's a start, but all of our housing needs assessments show that like Whetstone's not as enough.
Yeah.
You know, like the outcome of the housing needs assessment was that Whetstone's not enough. That it's a
I
start.
agree.
Yeah.
I've also disputed what I think have been the outcomes of a lot of those housing assessments. I don't think 1,000 is the realistic number. And I think this is gonna be the perfect barometer, because if we're 6 months into leasing and we still have empty units there, then either the formula with which the whole project was created was broken. That's
Unless they're just
debatable.
not here right now because they left because they didn't have housing. So we don't have that, you know, so the immediate need isn't there, but the job openings are.
Well, if you build more units, more people will come. That's
Hopefully,
inevitable.
yeah.
Especially if they're,
In time, I don't know if 6 months is enough lead time.
and
Yeah.
I just think of things like Gates's project in Gunny. Like, there were a lot of vacancies in there for over a year. But by everybody's standard and every housing need assessment, those should have been leased in 5 days. That whole thing should have been full, and it lagged, it was slow, like, so are we misreading the needs in the community? In that we're attaching AMIs to things that don't align with actual income and lendability and other factors? I'm not totally sure, but it's fascinating to me with this state of emergency, red alert, the sky is falling, there's no houses, which I agree with. Why does inventory sit sometimes? And so for me, I think Whetstone is an incredible case study for the future of how we operate with some of that stuff. One, it's the housing authority's first monster project that they're gonna handle themselves, the county housing authority. So like, I wanna let's see how it rolls out. How's the management? Did they carry over enough of the employees from before? Barb Carroll was a legend. Is she gonna be included on some of this stuff? Like, I wanna see how they kind of get to kick off their training wheels. And see if those places, and if they just get saturated within the first 6 months, then by all means, there's clearly, like, some people were spot on with their assessments. But going back to the individual things on the deed restriction, I think we're still on this income component. And,
What page are you looking for now?
oh, sorry, I think we're still in what was, 4.4? I'm looking for my red lines here.
That's rental.
Yeah.
Ownership.
I wanna go back to the HOA thing, but, does anybody think the 80-20 is maybe a little stringent? That we could find a balance at a 70-30? Is there, or is that conceding away from the function of what you want community housing to service?
And would that require a code? That does require a code.
Yes, that would require a code change as well.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still not super on board with the income requirement. I mean, I think if a person is in our community and working, I don't know that I really care how much money they're making outside of the community, like, especially if, you know, they've been here working for 20 years and making 50 grand a year, but saving, you know, really well. And now they make half their money from their investments that they did, you know, from saving from previous years. I'm okay with that as long as they're not, you know, exceeding our net worth cap, then, you know, they still can't afford to buy a house in this valley, despite the fact that they might actually have, you know, more income than what they're making here. If they're, you know, this, case we just recently had, the guy made a bunch of money from investments that year, and that's why he's not qualified. And that could happen to just about anybody in a single year, from, grandma dies and leaves them money to, really good lottery ticket. There's all kinds of things that could, technically mean that we throw them out of their house for, you know, being at, 79-21 or even, 69-31 at some point. But really, they're actually here and they're working. If they're here and they're working in the valley, um, I don't see the issue with caring what they make outside of the valley. It might not be perfect. There might be somebody who's, able to somehow take advantage of it, but I would still rather see a person taking advantage of it and not, and also be able to put people that deserve to be in affordable housing. Um, I feel like right now we're kind of erring on the wrong side, where, people are being penalized for things that they shouldn't be.
I just have a quick question for Shannon. Are you having trouble getting people that are earning 80% of their salary? I mean, when an affordable house comes up, is there a good group of people that all qualify that want to buy that house?
I think Kirsten,
Yeah,
I don't do qualifications, but
Kirsten can answer that.
Yeah, currently we are struggling to get some of our standard qualifying parameters met. I don't know if we need to do a little more advertising or not, but yeah, that has been an issue.
You're not getting, and is what's not being met that people aren't having the 80%?
Correct.
Mhm.
We had at least one that wasn't making 80%, was making less. And then we've had scenarios of more. Is that right, Kirsten? And then the other
Yes.
of the
Yep.
origins of the income.
So people that weren't making 80% of their money in Valley and or were making more than the AMI?
They weren't making enough to qualify under the
Right.
AMI, or they were making too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, just within the AMI itself. Oh,
And
And yeah,
Kirsten,
that's kind of the, okay.
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, because I know it does get confusing, especially because those numbers overlap. But yeah, in regards to AMI, what Carlos said is exactly correct. And then also in regards to the 80% in the valley, we have had that issue as well, where initially some of it was business income. So then once we got that amended and we are allowing business income, that helped for a couple circumstances. And I don't know if you guys could see my chat comment or not, but I definitely would want guidance if we were going to try and allow non-traditional billing hour business income, and how I'm supposed to figure that out would be fantastic. But yeah, there are households that getting their 80% to be in the valley has been a challenge.
So Pearson's comment in the chat, I currently examine pay stubs to determine average hours. My best idea for a business would be billable hours, which
Yeah.
would be verifiable for a business that physically operated in the valley. For other businesses, that would be complicated, and I would appreciate guidance.
Mhm.
Yeah, project-based performance you just can't live here, basically. If we went by that sort of standard, because you're not, I don't think I've ever submitted billable hours in any consulting contract I've ever done in the last 10 years. It's just, here's the project, here's the amount, and here's the timeline. So are we comfortable too, instead of shooting for perfection, are we comfortable acknowledging that we're gonna lock some cross sections of the community out of the housing race? And just say, well, that's sort of, it's unfortunate, but for us to maintain the integrity of this program and really meet these goals, then we just have to say, like, need not apply over here because we have a rule that you're not gonna be able to prove
Yeah.
you meet. Is that
Crazy
okay?
thought. What if it's 80% in the county or 30 hours a week on average?
Well, is that where Bruce was kind of going? But
That's what Bruce
Well,
was.
I was saying get rid of the 80, but yeah, I like that idea, Lita. I think that doing either or is also a good idea. Like,
If you
um,
can't verify hours, maybe you can verify income.
for sure, like that just opens up options for people, and I think they both do what we want.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Is any,
It sucks because we're kind of tied because this all goes against our code.
Yeah,
Well-
I actually want to pop in just because we have less than 10 minutes left. And I am looking for direction on what to communicate to Oros heading into the next council meeting. Is the desire to ask them whether or not they would be willing to amend their community housing plan to uh, incorporate this certificate of occupancy idea that I floated.
the way I saw it, Nick, would be we're looking to see if they are open to amending the agreement, right? And that would allow them to get their building permits issued in May. You would get their ball rolling. And then all the conversations I'm hearing here, it sounds like all we're doing is making it easier to get bodies into those units when they are ready. I think as long as we keep the CO conditional on deed restricted units being finished, I think that still needs to be in there. But at
Okay.
least their building permit, and I open that up if anybody has thoughts on that, but the deed restricted COs being parallel or prior to the Oros COs is still key for me personally.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think that timeline would probably not change. It would just be the approval of the deed restriction isn't, or the building permits aren't tied to the deed restriction.
Yeah.
And that gives us
Such
a
runway.
year,
Yeah.
2 years to really.
I don't want it to take that long,
Right.
but.
For 3 months.
Okay.
Their CO, I think their timeline for Oros and for Maroon Haus is 18 months to 2 years. They're trying to do it pretty quick. Well,
I will communicate that to their attorney tomorrow. And I am hoping they would be willing to submit that amendment. In the event they are not, this form you will see for approval or denial on the May 5th agenda. If they are willing to do that, then you'll just be seeing that amended community housing plan with this timing shakeup.
and the amended community housing plan just, it has a few more updates, like the name, it used to be Padma's Place, now Maroon House. There's a few others, little things that we will have them fix, for the community housing plan, but nothing substantive except for this timing.
It's not really my place to say anything, but Maroon House really sounds like it's a halfway house or something. Like, I hate that name. So if they want to change it, I would not be sad.
We like to call them sober living houses now, Bruce. Maroon House. Yeah, the marketing department again. Yeah,
Hippopotamus.
does that give you enough guidance, Nick?
That does, Steve. Thank you. I will communicate that with them and get with Carlos and Shannon. And obviously, you all will know what's going on once you get the agenda for the 5-5 meeting. If I need to get in touch with you all beforehand, I will, of course, send out a communication to the council.
Cool. And then really quick, the things that we had hoped to address today, a lot of the smaller line items, we adjusted gross income, touched on some of the points everybody brought up. If other counselors who are not present today, if Oros doesn't want to, is not comfortable to making that amendment, and we do need to vote on this on May 5th, do we have the ability to make real-time adjustments in that agenda item to some of these things that are currently the red line type stuff? Things that we haven't gotten through in this work session.
Yes, we will have that ability so long as it is something you can change that doesn't go against the code. If it's something that the code says has to be there, I will of course tell you that that's the way it is. But there are a lot of items that the code is silent on that could be changed on the fly.
Cool.
And if there are, you know, as you go through it again, less, things that might not contradict the code, like Bobby had a question about referencing Gunnison County and Gunnison Valley. If there's stuff like that you come across, please give me a call or shoot me an email and we can try to address that ahead of the meeting. So that it makes that agenda item a little shorter.
Sure.
Steps you're bringing to us for the first time.
If you come across those, we'll be happy to try to address them prior, but we can also do it during the meeting. But I think plan A is that we adopt a updated community housing plan.
Cool.
And maybe simultaneously, can we just be capturing some of these takeaways on code changes?
Mhm.
Okay, amazing. Since we're talking about it real time, I don't want to lose these nuggets.
I've been taking notes and I bet you Nick is taking really good ones.
Sweet.
And
Yes.
Nick.
Yes, I am. I
Go
am
ahead.
thinking about these chapter 22 changes holistically. I guess, Valida. I want to make sure that we have all this in mind, and then obviously down the line, I get the sense that we're going to want to just sit down for a couple hours and maybe even have a copy of the code in front of you and start redlining as we go.
And one other question, Nick. Oh, sorry, what was that?
It's just making that comment. Go ahead.
Oh, cool. One other thing, Nick, is if we determine we're getting down the road on this, in what scenario can the levels of deed restriction be changed in this current housing agreement that's already been agreed upon? And I'm bringing this up because when I'm listening to Kirsten say, yeah, we're struggling for people to find people that meet some of these AMI requirements, or 80/20s, I think too, was the point. Is there a conversation or legal process we can take with the applicant to adjust those deed restrictions down the road prior to first purchase to make them more amenable to a broader pool of buyers?
Yeah, but it would require obviously the code changes because
Yeah,
right,
100%.
and it would require both parties to want to dance in that scenario.
Yeah, totally. Okay. There is a legal path. We could do that though, correct?
I do think so. Yes, it would be. I think it'd be similar to what we're looking at now. We'd have to amend the code, and then the developer would have to be okay with amending their community housing plan in accordance with those code amendments. But the code amendments, of course, would not automatically retroactively apply to the community housing plan unless they choose to amend it.
Cool. Just wanted to know the process there. Thank you.
I think in the context of just to kind of close it down, the context of the strategic housing plan that we're working on, the flow would probably be working through that strategic plan for our 5-year goals. And then with those 5-year goals in mind, zooming in on the community housing guidelines and updating those. And then chapter 22 would follow that, so that the housing plan is the high level, and then the tools in the toolkit, the guidelines in the code will both match up with those goals. So that will be the flow.
Okay.
And then I guess if we're updating chapter 22, then the deed restriction final would be ahead of that.
Okay.
Right? After the update.
That finishes up the work session. Let's take a quick since we don't have a quorum, let's hang for till we might have a quorum. And then